Well, good morning. Thank you for your patience as we've opened the room up. Apparently, this is an important topic, so which is good. One of my pet peeves, I think, is that oftentimes we come to conferences, and obviously I go to them as well, and we go to all the technical types of sessions because we all have jobs that require compliance and the intricacies and everything. And oftentimes I walk past rooms that are more professional development related on a personal level, and they're empty, and I wonder why. Why don't we spend time working on ourselves? So I applaud you for coming in to work on yourselves. Because when we work on ourselves, we can better our organizations and we can better those that are around us. And that's what we're going to focus on today. That's what being a person of influence is all about. The ability to impact others, to add value to others, to drive others towards our goals, our visions within our organizations. I want you to take a minute and think about the person who has most influenced you, and go ahead and just jot their name down. Piece of paper or have them in your head, whichever. But think about that person for a moment. And it doesn't matter how they've influenced you. Perhaps it's through in your job, maybe it's in your personal life, a sports teacher, anything. Okay, you've got that person in your mind. I want to show of hands if that person is a close relative. Show of hands. So, okay, maybe a third of the room. Okay, show of hands if that person was academic, teacher type related person. Okay, handful. How about someone sporting related, a coach who's impacted you? Only a handful there. Okay, several of you didn't raise hands. Tell me who else we got. Oh, I'm sorry, a boss. A boss management person. Okay, handful. Those of you that did not raise your hands, anyone care to give me at least a clue on who this is? Who this person of influence is?
A colleague.
A colleague, so a peer, okay? All right, anyone else, peers? Someone with whom you worked, okay? How about someone from your faith tradition? Okay, a couple there. Anything that we've missed? Anyone who's not raised their hand, something that we've missed? Yes? Musicians have influenced you. Okay, so more of that sort of maybe pop culture sort of thing. Okay. Morning Joe. That will influence us to have a good day, yes. So, what's one commonality amongst all of those things that we just mentioned? All those people have one thing in common. Any guesses? Okay, so they're probably successful, and that's why we allowed them to influence us.
We have a relationship with them of some sort.
Okay, a relationship already exists. That's a good point because we're going to look at that. Yes?
A positive vision of something.
They're in a position of what?
To influence us.
Oh, they're in a position to influence us. So that's an interesting point. It's kind of where I was going, all right? They're in a position to influence us, but do they hold positions necessarily? No. Sometimes we get bogged down with thinking that we can't influence others because we're not in the right position. If only I had manager in my title, I'd be influential. If only I had director, VP, grand poobah, whatever it is, I could be influential. And I'm here to tell you that's garbage. And we just proved it, right? We've got people who have influenced us in our lives who were on a peer level or a parental level, but they weren't positional over us in most cases. And that's so important for us to understand as we embark on this journey for the next hour or so, is that regardless of where you are at on your career path or in your corporate ladder, you can be influential. In fact, most sociologists say that the average person, just people like you and me, we will influence how many people in our lifetime? I'll ask you before I give you the stat. How many people do you think that those of us in this room individually can influence in our lifetime? Start shouting it out. 25 people, okay? 100. Come on, this is like an auction. What? 150. 2,000. Now we're getting somewhere. Sold to the highest bidder. No. 7. Most sociologists say the average person will influence 10,000 people in their lifetime. 10,000 people. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. You're probably saying to yourself, I don't even know 10,000 people. How the heck am I supposed to influence them, right? But here's the thing. We don't always know that we're influencing people. Maybe there's something I'm going to say today that will influence one of you that I haven't met yet. That counts to my 10,000, right? But yet I don't necessarily know you. So how do we know there aren't people with whom we interact, that we influence? The person, our favorite checker at the grocery store, someone at church, a child that plays on your child's ball team or is in their scout pack or something like that. Sometimes we don't know who we influence. Sociologists also say that in a given day, the average person will influence 4 people. 4 people. Now, let's take that down just to the minuscule level. How many of you, is there a meal at the conference tonight, or are you on your own? I'm sorry? There's a luncheon, but is there a meal tonight? Reception, okay. So some of you are going to go out after the reception, probably, okay? And you've got coworkers here, and you've got new friends here, and what's going to happen when you decide where you're going to go out? What invariably happens?
Other people go out.
Okay, other people go out. But what has to happen before that? Discuss where you're going. Okay? Are we going to go right over here to the Bear's Den because it's close, we don't have to drive anywhere? Are we going to go into town to explore the latest craft brew pub? Where are we going to go? And your group is going to talk about this. And someone is going to toss an idea out, and everyone else is going to go, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's go there. They've had influence over you. Okay? So, I don't want to steal my own thunder, but we have influence sometimes when we don't even realize it. And so we're going to look at how do we influence people? How do we put this into our skill set so that we can use influence for good? So I want you to think about, currently, who do you influence? Who in your life considers you an influencer for them? Are you a scout volunteer? Are you a band leader? Are you a sports coach? Do you volunteer with a youth group in your faith tradition? Do you influence your children if you have them? A spouse, a significant other? We all have these people in our lives. Certainly, we've got coworkers, right? That on occasion we have to influence. We have to make business decisions oftentimes, and we have to influence people to our way of thinking. What's the one profession whose sole job it is to influence people? Interesting. I wasn't thinking about that, but I would agree. Lawyers, okay? Lobbyists, okay. They're a lot of times, well, no, I guess they're not always lawyers, but I would agree. Marketing and sales, right? Salespeople, that's their job, is to influence us to buy their service or their product. Okay? But if you think about it, we are all salespeople. Every day, all the time. What am I selling to you right now? Oh boy, I'm in trouble. that we can be influencers, right? Now, we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm trying to influence you to realize that you can be an influencer. Okay? So we're all selling all the time. We're selling ourselves all the time. Okay? And so when we think about who we influence, what I want you to think about next is, who do you want to influence? Are there people that you interact with that you don't have influence over currently, but that you'd like to have influence over? And I want you to think about why you currently feel you don't have influence over them, because we're going to keep that person in mind through the course of our session today. Okay? Name a good influencer. Someone, in the public realm who's a good influencer. I'm sorry? Ellen? Oprah? Okay. Others?
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. Okay, there's a good one.
I won't say good or bad, but Trump.
Okay.
I'm not going to say good.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay. Other influencers. Yes, ma'am.
One was Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, great influencer over children. Absolutely. So those are all good. We'll hold the politician stuff, okay, because we don't want to split aisles here. How about Adolf Hitler? Was he an influencer? Yep. For those of you that are, maybe boomers, how about Jim Jones? Was he an influencer? Yep. Jim Jones, drink the Kool-Aid. For those of you maybe don't know who he was, had his whole congregation kill themselves with the Kool-Aid, right? Okay? We can use influence in a very bad way. Those last two folks were manipulators. Charles Manson, manipulator. Okay? But he held influence over the Manson family. Think about the mafia. Do the heads of the mafia have influence over their family? Okay, yes, they influence them for bad. So we have to remember that just because we're trying to influence someone, this isn't about manipulation. It's not about using someone to get what we want. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about using influence to better ourselves in the workplace by making others better in the workplace, by adding value to them. That's how we influence people. So, I want you, if you have some paper in front of you, go ahead and draw a circle, put a little dot in the middle of it. And I've even labeled it like a compass, just so we know exactly what we're talking about here. What do you think the dot in the center of that circle represents? You, exactly, thank you. You. Who is the hardest person of all to lead? Yourself. Ourselves. Always the hardest person to lead, and here's why. And I just want you to think about whether you fall into this trap, because I personally think we all do. Think about the last time something went really well that you were in charge of. Maybe it was something at work, maybe it was something in your personal life, but just something, a project, something you did that went well. And you probably sat down at the end of the day, you gave yourself a nice pat on the back and said, dang, I did a good thing. Because we like to do that. Now, I want you to think about the last time something didn't go so well. It was a project you were in charge of. Business life, personal life. Didn't go well. Maybe it even outright failed. At the end of the day, you're sitting down, same chair, and you're sort of saying, wow, this failed because this person didn't do this, and if only this had gone differently, and that person over there didn't carry their weight. How often do we allow ourselves to get into that train of thought? That we're quick to pat ourselves on the back when it goes well, but fail to hold ourselves accountable for when it doesn't. That's why leading ourselves is so difficult. Because oftentimes there's no one there to hold us accountable except us. And if we're not willing to hold ourselves accountable, then we're going to be real quick to start passing the buck and saying, well, if she had done this or if he had done that, I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in. That's a whole topic that we could talk about for this entire session. How do we lead ourselves well? But it's where we start. If we can't figure that out, nothing else we're going to talk about in here this morning is going to matter. We have to be willing to hold ourselves accountable and lead ourselves well. Now, I want you to draw a line south. From you, straight down south. South has some good stuff, right? They got grits down there. They got, what else does South have? Sunshine? Pimento cheese. What else they got down there? Country music, palm trees, sunshine, okay? South isn't a bad place. It's not a bad place up here. It represents positional leadership. It means that the folks that are down south here follow us because they have to. Because we're their boss. We're their manager, their supervisor. We're their scout leader. We're their coach, whoever it happens to be. Here's the challenge with positional leadership. It only buys us a very short window of time to drive our influence over those folks. Once they realize that the only reason they have to follow us is because of our position, we're dead in the water with them. So, again, a lot of people think that, oh, once I get into that position, people are just going to say, oh, I get to follow her. How wonderful. No. That might happen for your first week, month, whatever in the job. But after that, you got to start putting up. And so positional leadership is precarious. And what I like to tell folks is that if you are in a position and you're leading people, and you're telling people to climb the mountain with you, and you turn around and look, and there's no one behind you, you're simply out for a walk. You're not taking anyone with you. Okay? What does it take, first and foremost, to be a leader? There's one thing you need, and that's it, to be a leader. Followers. If you have no followers, you are not a leader. It does not matter what your business card says. You're not a leader if no one's following you. Okay? That's the challenge with positional leadership, is that we could be in charge of folks, but they're not really following us. Maybe they do what they have to do simply because we sign their paychecks, or we sign off on their performance review, or we give them their assignments. But they're not really following us. Now I want you to draw a line straight across. West to east, east to west, whichever direction you prefer to travel. What do you think this line represents? Peers, thank you. Peer leadership. So a couple of you in that opening exercise said, yeah, Ed, I've got some peers that I consider influencers. That happens here. This is the start of something special. When we get our peers to follow along with us, it's the people that's sitting right beside us right now. It's the people sharing the cube with us or the office back home that look to us and say, you know what? They got something cool going on. And I'll listen to what they have to say. I'll allow them to influence me simply because I respect them. The title, the position is gone now. So they may be, peer level leadership could be people that are below you on the corporate ladder, may even report to you. But they're out of positional leadership because you've proven yourself to them. Now, there's only one place left to go, right? Straight up. So go ahead and draw your arrow up north. So we've talked about leading ourselves, talked about leading others through our position, talked about leading our peers. What are we doing if we're heading due north? I'm sorry?
Managing up.
Potentially managing up. But we're not talking about managing today. So what are we talking about? Leading up. We're talking about leading others. Perhaps those that are higher up than us in position, in tenure, whatever. People will tell me all the time, oh, I wish I could manage my boss. Okay? That's different than leading your boss. It can be done. It is the highest level of leadership. When you lead up and you start to develop other leaders through your influence, now your influence starts to spread. So do you see what's happened with our diagram? We started with us right there in the center and said, I just got to worry about me. I've got to figure me out right now. Once I figure me out, now I can influence and focus on those that report to me. I can work with them. When I get their respect, now I can branch out to my peers and those that are in the same level with me. And when I get that figured out, now I can start leading up. I can start influencing people, quote, up the food chain. Okay? That's where the power is. Good leaders develop other leaders. I was reading an article, a bit of a biography on Andrew Carnegie. And this, it was a transcript of an interview that he gave back in his heyday. And the journalist said to him, Mr. Carnegie, do you realize you have 42 millionaires working for you? And he said, really? Now $1 million back then is worth $20 million today. Okay, so frame of reference. He said, really, I hadn't thought about that. And the journalist said to him, well, where did you find 42 millionaires to come work for you? His response was, they weren't millionaires when they came to work for me. That was the power of him being able to inspire and influence others to greatness in his organization. And if you think about any great leader, isn't that what they do? They inspire greatness in people around them so that they can drive the vision of the organization forward. And when I get calls from organizations saying, Ed, help us, we're failing, we're not hitting our business goals, I almost always find it's due to a lack of leadership. It's not because overtime's through the roof, or they can't produce enough widgets, or they can't service their customers properly. I mean, yeah, those are all symptoms, to be sure, and they're always there. But those typically are not the reasons that the organization is failing. It's typically because leadership is failing. I was walking through a facility with a business owner one time, and he was complaining to me how they weren't making a profit. This was a custom kitchen cabinet manufacturer. And this was when, we were in a good economy. It should have been fine. They should have been making money. And they actually had lots of orders coming in. It wasn't like orders were drying up. They weren't making a profit. And so we looked at a couple of things. And there were two things that stood out to me. One was they had a security system throughout the plant that had video cameras. And so we took some time in the control room to just watch the security footage, just see what was going on out on the plant floor. And I see this one gentleman, and he's walking along, and he's got a board over his shoulder. And he's going somewhere, and he walks through the camera angle or whatever. There is a supervisor standing there talking with an employee. A couple minutes later, this same guy comes walking back, board is still on his shoulder. Walks again past the supervisor who's still talking to this employee. A couple minutes later, what did I see? Same dude carrying the same board. This went on for at least 10 minutes. And I'm looking there saying, what is that guy doing? I mean, I'm not a woodworker. I don't know if something's been happening to this board, and I just can't tell. And the owner says, I don't know what he's doing. And he's walked right past his supervisor. And they wonder why they're not making any money. Okay? That supervisor had no respect, no level of influence over his team, to the point that an employee would visually walk past him doing nothing 3 times in the course of 10 minutes, and the supervisor failed to say anything to the person. That takes some guts, but that's a symptom of failed leadership, of failing to inspire those around us around our goal, in that case, of putting out a quality product for our customers on time the first time. They couldn't do it. So I'll ask you to keep in mind that person or people that you said you want to influence. Is there a reason you don't have influence over them currently? Because that's where we'll want to head with your professional development over the next few minutes. So, I love this quote. Leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. Once you have followers, people say, I like what you have to say. I like your vision. I'm going to go there with you. You only have a short period of time to show them that you can add enough value to them that they will stick with you. And you see this, for those of you that are sports fans, pick your sport, okay? You see this in the sporting world where sometimes even successful teams go into revolt over their coach. Or worse yet, you look at the team and you say, man, not only the money that they spent to assemble this team, but look at this roster. They should be killing it. And they can't. That's a failure of the leader to make those folks want to work together to attain a goal. Now, I've had people tell me, but Ed, I'm a visionary. I'm all about the vision. Okay, great. Good leaders are visionaries. But what else does it take to motivate your team around that vision? If I was an NFL coach and you were my players and I walked into the locker room and I simply said, hey, you guys want to win a Super Bowl? What are you going to say? Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason you play the game, win the Super Bowl. Okay, great. So we're all centered around my vision, are we not? I want to win a Super Bowl. You guys want to win a Super Bowl. Everything's great. Go play. It doesn't work that way. You have to trust I'm going to put a good game plan in place. You have to trust that I'm going to surround you with coaches that are going to make you better in your particular position, that are going to push you harder. I've got to trust that you're going to hit the weight room and that you're going to exercise, maintain a good eating plan to stay in top health throughout the course of the season. It's a two-way street to get to that Super Bowl. And again, if you're a sports person, you've seen teams that you say, gosh, how could they possibly not go all the way? And they don't. It's because of disconnects. It's because of influences. And yes, occasionally a bad call on a ref. But for the most part, it comes back to a lack of influence. If that coach cannot maintain the locker room, it doesn't matter what kind of talent is sitting there in front of that coach. Business is no different. Doesn't matter if we hire the best and the brightest to work on our team. If we cannot influence them, we're not going anywhere. And today's workers, and let's start with the millennials, and now Gen Z coming in, they expect and demand good leadership from us. Not that the rest of us don't, but we were willing to sacrifice a little bit of that in order to fulfill some of our goals. The younger generations are not willing to do it. And we can sit here and we can complain. I say we, those of us that are not millennials or Gen Z, and we can complain about them. But the reality is they are changing the workplace for the better. They absolutely are. Their influence is being felt. Whether you like that influence or not, it's being felt in the workplace today. And for those of us that are still going to be in the workplace 10 years from now, it's going to look tremendously different because of their influence as a generation over what their expectations are in the workplace. They're demanding more out of us as leaders. And one of the things they're demanding more of is personal development. How can you make me a better person? I'm coaching a CEO right now, and she said to me in our session yesterday, Ed, I don't understand it. No one ever mentored me. I had to learn through hard knocks. I had to just figure stuff out, and I enjoyed that. Why do I have to take time to work with my staff? Why can't they just figure it out? And I said, do you believe you got a smart staff? She said, absolutely. I said, do you believe that they care about your organization? She said, absolutely. I said, then that's why you need to work with them. Because they're smart and they care. That's the two hardest hurdles to get over. Why would you want to squash their caring and waste their smarts by not spending time and working with them to make them better? Because if you don't, you're just going to be that lady sitting in the corner office over there. That's it. And when you walk out, they're going to say hello, they're going to be polite, but they're not going to be inspired. And she looked at me and she said, "Gosh, Ed, all of my previous managers let me down." I said, "Yep, they did, because they failed to do that for you." So we've said influence is not about position. It's about our ability to add value to other people. How can we add value to other people? Okay, give them the tools that they need to do their job. That's a good one.
They need validation, telling them good job.
Okay, so praise and recognition. People want it. They deserve it. Right? Again, people pound on the millennials and the Gen Zs. All they want is their ego stroked. So what? I'm not convinced that's 100% true, but so what? We all like our ego stroked, don't we? We all like to hear that we've done a good job. Thank you. We all want to hear that. And I get so frustrated when I talk with managers and supervisors who say, "You know what? I hired them to do the job. I shouldn't have to thank them for it." Really? If you have children and they do a chore at home, do you say thank you to your kids? Or do you say, "No, you live under my roof. I told you to do it. Go do it"? Maybe. I don't know. When you ask them when you ask them 5 times and they haven't done it, right? But generally, you would say thank you, even when they did it begrudgingly. Thank you for doing that. Okay? So I'm not quite sure why we have this disconnect. And we think that because we're in a position over someone that we can't open up to them. So I told this CEO yesterday, I said, you know, and I shared a story with her about a mistake that I had made. And I said, I tell you this story simply because I want you to understand that just because I'm your coach and I'm helping you work through some of these things to make you better, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It doesn't mean that I've got all this stuff down and that I don't make my own mistakes. Leadership is not about being perfect. Influence is not about being perfect. For those of you that are parents, I'm sure you made some bad parenting decisions. You did some stuff like, okay, well, that was kind of stupid of me. And hopefully you apologized to your child and said, you know, I overreacted. I shouldn't have said that or whatever. Okay? Why? Because we care about our kids. We want to influence them, correct? And so how we act in the workplace really isn't significantly different. And not because our coworkers are children. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is that the simple things are what gets you the influence, not climbing the ladder. In fact, I'd argue you can't climb that ladder if you're not doing the little things. You guys have heard of the Peter Principle? How many of you know what the Peter Principle is? Only a couple? All right, so for the rest of you, Peter Principle basically says that sooner or later we will all get promoted to our individual level of incompetence. Okay? Now think about this for a minute. I start off down here. Whatever this job is, it's entry level. I do a great job. So someone says, well, heck, she's doing a good job here. Let's promote her. We'll make her a supervisor of these other people. She does a great job. Okay, let's pop her up again and pop her up again. And we don't give them any skills to make them better. Sooner or later, they're going to get further up here. They're going to fail. And we're going to say, what the heck just happened? Last 15 years, they've been awesome. All of a sudden, it's like they hit a wall. Yeah, because we stopped adding value to them somewhere along the way. We stopped working with them. We stopped investing in them as individuals. That is where our influence comes from. So I want you to think about the person you want to influence. How can you add value to them? What can you do for them? What do they need from you that maybe you've not been giving them? That's where value starts. So when we think about leadership, again, it's about people. It's about pulling the people up the mountain. Any rock climbers in here? No rock climbers? Okay, so when you I'm not either, but I know a little bit about it. So when you climb rocks, you've probably seen the movies, they're all attached to each other, right? When they're scaling the rocks. Why are they all attached to each other? Safety, okay? Because I'm anchored in, and you're anchored in, and she's anchored in, he's anchored in. And so if one of us falls, the hope is that because the rest of us are anchored in, we're not all going to fall. But the mantra is, you fall, I fall. Think about that in terms of what we do in the business world. Do we allow others to fall, maybe on purpose, for our own personal gain? Or do we step in because we're the anchor and say, let me help you. Let me help you through this because I've been there. I'm a bit of a football fan, and I recall, 15 years ago or whatever, when Aaron Rodgers came into the league. So the Green Bay Packers draft him. He does not start his first couple of years because Brett Favre is still there. And people used to ask in interviews, they used to ask Brett Favre, hey, Brett, are you working with Aaron? Anyone remember what Brett said? Not my job. I'm here to do my job. I'm not here to work with him. And he took heat for that. Should he have taken heat for that? Yeah. Heck yeah, he should have. Okay? He was the veteran. He, in my opinion, was scared of losing his job sooner than he was ready to lose it. So he did not want to share his insight of the game with a younger man who was clearly at a better stage of physical health than he was at that point in his career. But what was lacking in Aaron was the knowledge of the pro game and how to adjust to the speed of the pro game. And so you see NFL teams now have learned from that. And they bring in, oftentimes when they have that young rookie quarterback, their backup quarterback is usually someone who's been around for a while, who's a good mentor and a good teacher to whisper in their ear. Why? Because they recognize that to make that new rookie a really good leader, they've got to surround them with other good leaders. That's how they get their perspective. That's how they get their skill sets. I've seen many times in my career people that have mentored others, and those others have leapt them on the organizational chart. Is that okay? Should be okay. But I had a manager early on in my career tell me, Ed, be careful how much you share with other people. You'll make yourself disposable. Anyone buy into that? Hope not. The worst advice I ever heard. And I think I knew it then. I was probably in my mid to late 20s. And I think I knew it was pretty bad then. Now when I look back, I'm like, how horrible is that? Needless to say, that gentleman never got any further in his career with us. He was always that same level of manager for the next 25 years or whatever. Why? Because he didn't take time to develop other people, to develop those around him and make them leaders as well. So let's look at these, 6, 7 ways that we can influence people in the workplace. And we're not going to talk about all of them. I want to highlight just a few of them. Force being the worst, okay? We force someone to do something. Really has no place in the workplace, forcing people to do something. Now, I do recognize that if you have an absolutely poor performer and you have worked with this person time and time and time again and they're still not doing anything that they're supposed to be doing, at that point, should you be forcing them to do something or should you be cutting ties with that person? I don't believe forcing someone has any place in the world of business because I should be surrounded by people who willingly do what I need them to do because they're inspired. We talked a little bit about manipulation and how that's horrible. I want to focus on intimidation a little bit. Most studies show that intimidation is the number one way we influence in the workplace. Is that scary to you? Where does intimidation come into play in the workplace? How is it used? Yeah. Like, do this or I'll fire you kind of thing? Okay, I'd even throw that under force in a way. Let's take it one step further. How else does it show up in the workplace, intimidation? Okay, if you don't do this, you're not getting a promotion. I'm not going to send you to that conference if you can't get this project done, or whatever it happens to be. If you don't do it my way, forget it. I want you to think about whether you've ever worked for someone with that kind of attitude. I'd almost be surprised if you didn't at some point in your career. Hopefully they're not sitting right beside you, okay? But I think, I worked for someone who had that mentality. The worst year and a half of my life. Because it was all about, it didn't matter how creative we could be in the workplace. It was all about, I'm the manager, this is how I want it done, go do it that way. Is that inspiring? Nope. And I will tell you again, the younger generations will not tolerate that. They're gone. If we don't have a collaborative, brainstorming, creative environment, they're not going to be inspired no matter what we do. So I want to take a little bit of a dive here into intimidation. So when we think about intimidation, what are ways that we use to intimidate people? How do we intimidate them? Okay, our body language can be intimidating. I bring you into my office. I sit you across from my desk. That's intimidating. Okay? How else?
Your tone of voice.
Tone of voice, absolutely. Yes?
Public shaming.
Public shaming. If only Robin had done the job, we'd all be getting bonuses. But since she screwed up, people do it all the time. Maybe not that blatant, but they do it. Do some people intimidate through position? Whether that be position in life or position on the corporate ladder. That's a lot of times where it comes in. Early on in my career, I won't tell you the company I was with, but early on in my career, I was a supervisor level in this organization. And so above me would have been a manager and then a division level manager. And I had human resources responsibilities, and we were looking at promoting some hourly workers into higher level of hourly workers. Now, we were a union shop, and so that meant that if someone came up for those opportunities, it was based on seniority, but you still had to meet the qualifications. So we had a gentleman who was coming up through, and I was not 100% convinced he met the qualifications of the position. There were a couple of gray areas, and we were discussing this. Okay? This gentleman was African American, and this comes into play. My division manager was a white guy. Obviously, I'm a white guy. We're talking about this situation. He puts his arm around. Now remember, this guy is 2 levels above me. 2 levels above me. He puts his arm around me as we're walking through the facility, very fatherly-like. And is that not a form of intimidation anyway? Arm around, we're walking through. And he says to me, Ed, you got to let this go. You've got to let this guy have this job. And I said, why? I want to make sure we're doing the right thing here. He said, you don't understand. Those people don't think like you and I do. Now, aside from the obvious disgustingness of that comment, what was happening to me at that point in time? There's a gentleman who, when they would go into, they were called the people meetings to discuss who was ready for promotion, essentially held my career in his hands. and he has that attitude. That's problematic, okay? That's intimidation. That's using our position to influence a decision for all the wrong reasons. Now, fortunately, I did end up promoting this gentleman, not because of that comment, but because he deserved it. We worked through some of the gray areas, found that, we tested him a little bit, developed him a little bit, found out that he was the right person for the job. It didn't have to come to that kind of discussion with someone. And I would hope that you've never had an experience like that. But if you have, that's intimidation at its best. It's manipulating someone else to get something that we want. Okay? And honestly, any kind of harassment or discrimination in the workplace is all about intimidation. It's all about power. Okay? This is the problem with intimidation. After that event, how much respect did I have for that division manager? None. None. We had a good working relationship up to that point in time. I'm not saying that, we sat around the campfire roasting s'mores all the time, don't get me wrong, but we had a good working relationship. There were a couple times we went out for a beer after work. Never happened after that. In fact, I was 100% business with this gentleman. That's it. Simply because I checked out. Now, I stayed with the company a little bit longer because he got transferred. I ended up getting promoted. Some other good things happened. But I checked out while he was still in charge of the building that I was in charge of HR for. Simply because of that one event. That's the challenge. What does disengagement look like in your workplace? How does it rear its ugly head? I'm sorry? Calling out. So absenteeism goes up. What else? Come on, I know you guys know this stuff.
Not caring.
People don't care, but how does that show? Quality. Okay, what else? Morale goes down. Okay? People don't want to go out to lunch together. They don't want to go to the holiday party, whatever it is. We see the tangible signs of disengagement, and oftentimes that comes back to leadership. I've talked to way too many business leaders who think that the culture of the workplace is just what it is. I actually had one business owner say to me, Ed, I'd like you to come in and help me develop a culture. I said, no, you want me to come in and help you develop a particular kind of culture, right? I mean, No, I want you to develop a culture. Like, I don't know what that means. He says, we don't have a culture. Like, yes, you do. You just don't know what it is, clearly. That's like saying your own family has no traditions. Like how you eat Thanksgiving or how you celebrate holidays or, again, what your faith tradition is or whatever. It's silly. We all have them. And so this leader had no clue what was going on. He held no influence over his people whatsoever. So they weren't engaging with him, so he thought there was no culture. We had to talk about influence. Now, I want you to ask yourself this. Why do you want to use influence in the workplace? And jot that down. Keeping in mind that person that you want to influence, why do you want to influence that person? Why do you want to learn how to influence in the workplace? Why is it so important to you? And what I'd ask you to think about here is it solely for your own personal gain? Okay, if it is, all right, but go back to the compass. That's all about self-leadership, which isn't going to get you very far. Is it because you care about that person or those people? Now we're getting somewhere. Is it a little of both? That if you can influence these other people, it does help you and maybe helps you grow. Nothing wrong with that. Not saying that there's not something in it for us. There's a lot in it for us when we develop those around us. I routinely get calls from people that'll say, hey, Ed, I met someone that wants to go into business for themselves. I think you would be great for them to talk to. Would you take a coffee meeting for them? Just happened last week again. I was speaking at a conference last week, was at a cocktail hour the night before, and someone said, Ed, I'm glad I saw you here. This is going on. Would you have a chat with this person? Sure, why not? What's in it for me if I do that? I mean, there's time out of my day. Maybe they're even going into business similar to what I do, and they're going to be a competitor. I've had those coffees as well. What's in it for me?
More business, potentially.
Maybe. But let's where does business come from? Relationships. It's all about relationships. And when you think about what it takes for you to be successful in your job, I'm willing to bet it comes down to relationships. And so when I think about why we want to influence, it should be to build relationships with other people. That's how we succeed in business, no matter what it is that we do in business. It takes relationships. And I've had people debate me on this, believe it or not. Oh, but here's a position that doesn't take a relationship. Yes, it does. Everything revolves around relationships. Everything. Not just in business, but obviously in our personal lives. So I'm hoping that one of the reasons you want to influence is to build better relationships, because they're going to come out of your ability to influence others. But it starts with that relationship. If I don't have a relationship with you in some way, shape, or form, it's going to be hard for me to influence you. So everything starts with the relationship. Do your people know that you care about them? Because there's a saying, people don't care about what you know until they know that you care. There's a lot of wisdom in that statement. If you haven't expressed that you care about your people and you care about their professional development, they're not going to care about what's important to you. It is a relationship that has to happen. Okay? But all of this comes back to trust. So I want you to think about the people that you trust the most, personally and professionally. Why do you trust them? Personally, I hope it's a significant other, spouse, whatever. Professionally, hopefully you've got some peers or bosses, mentors that you trust. What has to come before trust? Respect. Thank you. I was going to ask what comes before respect? The relationship. Okay? This is a continuum, folks. We don't jump to influence without doing these things. If we don't build the relationship that leads to caring about the other person, that leads to trust, forget it. If people don't trust you, they will not follow you. If they're following you when they don't trust you, then you're probably at the manipulation level or the coercion level. You're not truly influencing them. I think about one of the best friends that I've got right now. I only met him 7-8 years ago. And I'm fortunate, I still live in the town that I grew up in. So, I've got friends I've known since I was 5 years old. We still hang out. It's cool. But this guy came into my life professionally, was introduced, different industry, but someone said, you guys got to meet because you both know lots of people and maybe you can do business together. So we met, had coffee, liked each other, chatted about business, chatted about life, whatever. Found out we had similar interests. Decided, we both have an interest in craft beer. Next time we get together, let's go grab a beer at some swanky, craft brew pub. So we did that. And it went from there. We found we liked to golf. We started golfing. We both have daughters the same age. All those things started to build the relationship. to the point now that we've helped it and seen each other through some hard personal times. That's trust, right? Now, I'm not saying that's the way things are going to progress in the office necessarily, but do you have the trust of your people? And if you don't, then you have to ask yourself, why don't I? What have I done that has destroyed trust? That would be the worst possible thing. But hopefully it's, okay, I don't have the trust because I haven't done some things, because that's easier to recover from. But ask yourself where that trust, how can you build trust in your relationships? Because you can't be an influencer without it. Take a look at this quote from Stephen Covey. And actually, I want to expand upon it. He says, the trust and the speed at which it's established with clients and employees is the essential ingredient for any high-performance, successful organization. He goes on to say, and I didn't want to put this all on the slide, he goes on to say, from business leaders and public figures to the everyday person like you and me, in any arena, trust affects our every transaction, and relationship, from the most personal to the broadest, most indirect interaction. The world is changing very fast. Big will not beat small anymore. It will be fast beating the slow. When I think about that, how fast will you jump if your best friend or a loved one calls you at 3 o'clock in the morning with a problem? Will we answer the phone and say, I'm there? Why? Because there's a relationship. There's caring and there's trust. Will our people jump like that when there's a business problem that needs solving? If you want a great example, there is a book, it's probably 20 years old now, but I still skim it periodically. It's called The Great Game of Business. And it talks about these gentlemen that bought a tractor manufacturing plant out in the Midwest. And it was kind of in the tanks, but it was all this factory was all this town had. So if this factory goes under, this town is in deep trouble. They begin to build trust. This new ownership group begins to build trust with the employees through open book management style, showing them the numbers, showing them how bad things really are, and asking them for help in solving these problems. They get a huge opportunity with Russia to sell them, I forget the number of pieces of farm equipment, but it was a monster number, which was really cool, except for the fact the timeline on delivery was really short, and it was an all or nothing deal. And they recognized if they can fulfill this order, it's going to set this company up for the foreseeable future. They bring the team together. They talk about what it's going to take to make this happen. Because they had been so open with the books and they had built the trust, not only did they fulfill the contract, they fulfilled it early. That's the perfect example of Mr. Covey's statement that the fast are the ones that are going to win in business, regardless of the nature of our business. Our ability to service our clients quickly and in the best way possible is what is going to separate us from our competition. And the only way to be fast is to have trust amongst the employees. That's the only way. One of my first management jobs, I was a delivery supervisor. And so I had drivers that I would dispatch. And one of the things that we had to do every year was at least annually ride with each driver and do a safety ride with them. We reviewed safe work habits, safe driving habits. And so this one day, one of the gentlemen in my group was one of the more long-term drivers. Guy hadn't had an accident on the road in 25 years. Was a member of what we called our Circle of Honor, highest honor that we gave our drivers. I was 23 years old. Now, Think about this for a moment. The guy hadn't had an accident since before I was born. I'm supposed to go do a safety ride and review safe driving habits with him. Now, I get it. From a compliance situation, something we had to do. But see, here's the thing. And there's a reason I'm telling you this story, because it's about relationships and about trust. We had about a half-hour ride out to his delivery area. And on that ride, I looked at him, and I said, you know, Mel, this is awkward for me. I'm 23. You got 25 years of safe driving. I don't know what I'm supposed to teach you out here. Yes, I've been through all the classes and all that stuff, but tell you what, I got to fill the form out. How about all day long you talk to me about how you've been a safe driver for 25 years? Talk to me about your near misses. What are the things you've learned along the way? Help me to be a better supervisor so I can take your knowledge and share it with the other drivers that I have to ride with. We had a wonderful day together. We built a relationship. Now here's where the trust thing comes in. One day he got in relatively early, but we had a major problem with a tractor trailer. It had broken down, so we had to send a bunch of our smaller trucks out to make a pickup. And we were getting in a bind in terms of getting this customer picked up before they closed. So here comes Mel again, senior level guy. And he could have easily told me no, but I went out and said, we've got this problem. Would you be willing today, this one time, to go back out on the road and help us pick up some of these boxes? He says, sure. Off he goes. I walk back into the office. My manager says, what did you just do? Sent Mel out to help out with that pickup. He says, what were you thinking? I was thinking about getting the customer picked up and getting the boxes back here. That's what I was thinking. I don't know. What are you getting at? He says, why would you send one of our most senior guys out there? Why wouldn't you wait for one of the younger guys to come in and send him out? I said, because we needed it covered. I asked. He said, yes. What is the problem? Manager walked back into his office. What he failed to realize was that, yes, maybe I called in a favor. But that driver did that because he trusted that I wasn't going to do this to him all the time. That I asked him for a favor that one time. I went to the well that one time for him. And again, I'm not going to stand here and say that I'm the world's greatest relationship builder. I struggle on some fronts too. All I'm saying is if we don't build the trust, if I don't build the relationship with him that day on the road, I could have easily gotten on that truck with that clipboard and said, here's how we're going to do things today, and been a complete jerk. And we would have gotten through the day. We would have not had a relationship. There would have been no trust. Doesn't make any sense to do it that way. Not my style. Okay? People want to know these things. Before they'll go down the trust road and allow you to influence them, they want to know those three things. Do you actually care about me? Do you truly care about me and my development as an employee? Do you care about me as a person? Or am I just a number on a spreadsheet to you or a cog in the wheel? People want to know if you can help them. How can you help me get better in my career? One of my favorite managers of all time, as I've looked back on my career, was the gentleman who did the most to professionally develop me. He took time not just from a hard skill standpoint development, but from being a better manager, a better supervisor, a better leader early in my career. I was so lucky to have that influence because I had my share of bad. I've given you a couple examples, okay? But I knew he could help me. To this day, neither of us are at the organization. He's gone on to do quite well in his career. I know that if I needed a favor, especially professionally, I could call him, and there is still enough trust there that we'd say, yeah, let's go do this. That's the power of the relationship. That's the power of doing the first two things, letting your people know that you care about them and being willing to help them develop. And sometimes that means sharing some of your knowledge with them instead of hoarding it It's okay. Because here's what I found. When you share your knowledge with others, that frees you up to do what? Maybe do other things that you want to do. To be able to go to the next level and say, hey, I'm working with Megan on this, and she's doing well. I think I could take on some additional responsibilities now. And now you can better develop you. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I don't develop Megan, I don't free myself up enough to develop myself, to go ask for those additional responsibilities, those additional projects. And now we're dead in the water. So we're going to look at the 4 ways. We're in the home stretch. How do we build influence? We know why we need to build it. Here's how we can do it. Here's your roadmap, okay? When we add value to ourselves, we add value to others. When you come to sessions like this, you work on yourself. You will go back a better person because you'll have knowledge that's not just technical in nature. But please take something out of this, because the biggest performance gap that we all have is the one between what we know we should be doing or that we know how to do and actually going back and doing it. We all have that performance gap. If you want to be successful, you got to close that performance gap down and start to say, okay, I've heard some of what that guy said before. Why am I not using it? I don't understand. And we got to go use it, because that's what our people need in order to be influenced by us. So when we work with our people and things go as they're going to go, I want you to ask yourself these questions. People say that experience is the best teacher. I disagree. Evaluated experiences are the best teacher. If we don't look back at our mistakes and our successes and ask ourselves those 3 questions, we don't learn from the experience. Because even our successes, there's probably some things that went wrong. That we can say, okay, even though I nailed it, what could I improve upon? Or it went wrong, but was there something that was right in the middle of it? And then figuring out what you're going to do differently. Again, the best sports teams do it. It's football season. I can't help but use football. The teams go in at halftime, and what do? They make adjustments. This part of the game plan's not working. Let's change this over here. Let's change personnel, put some different plays in. We do the same thing in business. We shift on the fly. We make adjustments when we find that something's not working. But we do that through our evaluation of our experiences with what's happening. And if we fail to do this, we will never grow. It's that simple. We're destined to keep doing what we're doing because we're not learning from the experience. So here's the 4 steps to influencing. We're going to go into the home stretch now with this. Okay? First one up here, modeling behaviors. How trustworthy are you? And I want you to be honest with yourself. Are you quick to spread office gossip? Are you quick to talk about other people behind their back? Are you quick to tear other people down to make yourself look better? If so, you're not real trustworthy. If you're not trustworthy, you're not going to influence anybody, anywhere, anytime. It's just not possible. So you have to be willing to model the qualities that we've been talking about today, which means caring about people, investing in a relationship with the people around you, not just those below you, but your peers as well and those above you. All right? Because once they perceive that you are a positive influence in their lives, now they'll seek you out. And that's what I think flatters me the most when I get these calls. Ed, would you take a coffee with someone to help them out? Because that tells me, wow, that person respects me enough that they want to introduce me to someone who's making a pretty big life decision, like going into business for themselves. And I don't take that lightly. There's times I forget that it's that impactful, but I don't take it lightly. And I realize, wow, that's because I've built that relationship with that person, and they value that relationship, and so they must want that this other person to have that same relationship with me. And I think that's pretty cool. It's humbling, quite honestly, but it's really cool. And for me, it's very professionally fulfilling. So I do derive a lot of satisfaction out of that. We can model to the masses, but influence starts at the individual relationship level, so don't forget that. Don't think, oh my gosh, this stuff was so cool, and I'm going back to my work team, and I'm just going to nail it. That's a great attitude, don't get me wrong, it is. But make sure that you're starting with individuals. That's where we build the relationships, one-on-one. Spend time having coffee in the break room with people. Take them to lunch. Get away from the workplace. Invest in, you know what, we're not going to go to lunch and talk about the project. Let's just go to lunch. Because why not? If your office happens to be somewhere where there's a park, go for a walking meeting. Why sit and have coffee somewhere? We sit all day long. I mean, the weather's still nice. Let's go for a walk and chat. It tends to allow our barriers to come down. It's more informal. It's more relaxed. And that opens up the environment for trust to begin. Motivating. We've got to be encouragers of people. We have to be willing to build people up and say, go get them, Tiger. They have to know that we are their biggest cheerleader. Again, that's part of building the relationship and developing the trust is our ability to communicate on an emotional level with somebody. Because if we can be emotional with somebody, then they know that we care. If we're that stodgy robot of a coworker, no, I'm not going out for lunch with you. No, I'm not going to go have cocktails after the meal. No, I don't want to talk about my personal life. You see I don't have any pictures here. Stick to business because that's me. More power to you. You know, I'm not casting stones. All I'm saying is, what's that doing for you? Is that a way to build relationships? Is that a way to get emotional fulfillment between two people that leads to trust? If you're unable to do these things, that's okay. That's why we're here, to think about them and to work on them. Okay? But you have to be willing to go out on a limb. Think about it. On fruit trees, where is the fruit? Really? Where is the fruit? On the limb, thank you. If you don't go out on the limb, there ain't no apples for apple pie, okay? Too often we hold on to the trunk because it's safe there. And we look up and say, oh, those apples look so good. But we won't go get them. You've got to be willing to open yourself up. Have to. It's scary. Trust me, I get it. I've been there. It's still scary. I'm an introvert by nature. It is scary for me to open myself up to other people. I do it because I've realized the fulfillment I get when I do it. It overcomes my introversion. Third thing, mentoring. Who can you mentor? Sometimes people think, again, well, I got to be in a certain position to mentor somebody. I got to have 3 stripes on my shoulder to mentor someone. No, you don't. I'll go back to some of our opening comments. Sometimes we don't know the influence that we have over other people. We just don't. I coach my daughter's softball team. So it's 13, 10 to 12-year-olds, girls. And people wonder why I'm gray and bald. But they're a wonderful bunch of kids. I've had essentially this same team now for about the last 4 years as they moved up. The other week, we got out of school early, and so a bunch of the parents were standing there as the kids are coming out, and I see the younger sister of a good business friend of mine. I was like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Oh, my kid's in kindergarten here now. Okay, great, we're chatting. So I introduced her to one of the moms that I was standing there talking with of one of my softball players. And she said, oh, how do you know Ed? And she goes, well, My daughter's been playing for Ed. He is the best softball coach ever. My daughter has told us she won't play if he's not her coach. Now, I'm standing there like, really? Really? And, and then I started thinking about this. And I realized it's influence. That for whatever I've done with this little girl's development over the last 4 years, not just in teaching her the game of softball, but hopefully in some things about life and how to be a better person while you're on the softball field. How do you win and lose gracefully? How do you give it your best no matter what? How do you go out on that field every single inning when it's 90 degrees outside and you'd rather sit in the dugout in the shade and not complain about the heat? Those are little things, but I'm realizing that, wow, Ed, you're kind of mentoring these little girls. Didn't go into it doing that. I love the sport. Grew up playing baseball. And yet I'm realizing, when I asked you earlier, who do you influence? Here I am teaching this stuff, and I never thought about the fact that I'm influencing these young ladies. Who knew? We get so close to ourselves sometimes that we forget to step back and think about these sort of things. So think about who you can mentor. Maybe who you mentor already. Maybe it's not a formal mentor relationship, but you realize, gosh, this person comes to me with their challenges in the workplace, and I help them through, and I help them think about things. How cool is that? You're already part of the way there. All right? Here is the highest level you get to. It's when you are able to multiply leaders. When you start to develop other leaders. When I think about this is where success professionally really comes in for all of us. If you believe that your success is driven through other people and you can do this, the sky is your limit. It absolutely is your limit. And there are times when I have these coffee meetings with folks that want to talk about starting their own business or what have you. And there are times I try to talk them out of it. Not because they don't have a good idea, but because I'm not convinced that they can multiply the lives of others. And that's what owning a business to me is all about. How do you make the world a better place? That's it. How do you make that world a better place? By developing other really good people in the world. That's how we make it a better place. I know I'm getting really kind of high level there. But when you think about it, that's what it's all about. Your world is your office. That's what we're talking about. So how do you make your office a better place? By multiplying leaders in your workplace. That's how we do it. I love this quote as we're wrapping up. You all know Jackie Robinson. Not only a great baseball player, but a great humanitarian. A life isn't significant except for its impact on the lives of others. I would argue that that's what our coworkers and our employees expect from us, to impact them positively. They expect it. That's where we started the morning out. They expect it. Let's give it to them. That's the true measure of success. It's why I love to wrap this up, and not just in this session. I use this quote a lot because I love it. It grounds me. It helps me to remember that that's why I'm here. It's why I'm in business. It's why I'm a parent. It's why I'm a spouse. To impact other people. Hopefully for the better, right? It comes back to our dot. That's self-leadership. Start there. Learn to hold yourself accountable and lead yourself well. Then others will start to follow simply because of your example. It all starts with you. We started out with you. We're ending with you. Work on yourself first. What I'd ask you to do for homework, because I believe you come to these conferences, you got to go home with homework. You got to learn something. Think about what you can do on a daily basis to improve yourself. Daily, yes, I said it. Daily. Here's the thing. John Wooden, UCLA basketball coach, one of the most famous college basketball coaches of all time, used to tell his players, don't give me 70% today and think that you can give me 130 tomorrow and that we're even. You're already behind the ball. Because if you can give me 130 tomorrow and you gave me 100 today, you're ahead of the game. Do something for yourself every day. Buy that business book or self-development book you've been wanting and read one chapter. Instead of answering emails at lunch, turn your computer off, read one chapter, make some notes, think about it, process it. Whatever it is you need to do, listen to a webinar, a podcast, an audiobook, do something. Commit to yourself to do something to develop yourself every single day. Final thought. If you can master your ability to influence others, it is absolutely the key to your professional growth. Nothing is more important. Nothing. In the last hour or so, if this hasn't been driven home, like I teach a class at Millersville University, and my students always tell me, you know, Mr. Crow, when we hear you say something 3 times, we know it's going to be on the test. You've heard this, okay? It's on your test, only I'm not going to be grading you. You're going to be grading yourselves and holding yourselves accountable to it. Okay? So thank you so much for being willing to be here. And thank you so much for the expansion and the toleration of the expansion. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Oh, absolutely.